The backyard of my parents' house looked like something from a lifestyle magazine. White tents stretched across the lawn, strings of lights crisscrossed overhead and tables decorated with navy and gold. My father's favorite colors held elaborate floral arrangements. 80 guests milled around champagne glasses in hand, celebrating Daniel Carter's 65th birthday in style. I stood near the edge of the property, nursing a glass of sparkling water and watching my family work the crowd. My father held court near the main tent, telling stories about his career as a civil engineer. My mother, Susan, fluttered between groups of guests, making sure everyone felt welcomed and entertained. My older brother Marcus and younger sister Bethany circulated with their spouses. The picture of successful adult children. And then there was me, 34-year-old Natalie Carter, standing alone in a simple sundress I'd bought online for $45, holding water instead of champagne, looking every bit the family oddball I'd apparently become. Natalie, my Aunt Linda approached with her husband Paul. "We haven't seen you in forever. How have you been?" "Good," I replied with a smile. "Work's been busy." "Still doing that freelance thing?" Paul asked, and I heard the unspoken judgment in his voice. "Must be nice to have such flexible hours." "It has its benefits," I agreed, not bothering to correct his assumption that I was barely employed. "Well, if you ever need career advice," Linda said, patting my arm. "Paul knows lots of people. We could help you find something more stable." "I appreciate that," I said, knowing I'd never take them up on it. They drifted away, and I caught fragments of their conversation. "Still hasn't figured things out. Such a shame. Daniel and Susan must worry." I was used to it by now. In a family of high achievers, I was the disappointment. Marcus was a successful attorney. Bethany had married a doctor and lived in a mini mansion with their 3 perfect children. Even my younger cousins seemed to have more impressive careers than me. Nobody knew what I actually did. They'd stopped asking years ago, content with their assumptions that I was struggling, barely making ends meet, probably living paycheck to paycheck in some tiny apartment. The sound of a spoon tapping against glass drew everyone's attention. Marcus stood on the small stage that had been set up, microphone in hand, looking confident and polished in his tailored suit. "If I could have everyone's attention," he called out, his courtroom voice carrying across the yard. "I'd like to say a few words about our father." People gathered closer, forming a semicircle around the stage. I stayed where I was at the back of the crowd. "Dad, you've been an inspiration to all of us," Marcus began. "You built a successful career, provided for your family, and taught us the value of hard work and integrity. On your 65th birthday, we want to honor that legacy." Applause rippled through the crowd. My father looked genuinely moved. "But today I need to address something serious," Marcus continued, and his tone shifted. "Something I've recently discovered that affects this entire family." The crowd went quiet. I felt my stomach tighten. Whatever was coming, it wasn't good. "Over the past few months, I've been getting calls from family members," Marcus said, looking around at the assembled relatives. "Aunt Linda, Uncle Paul, Cousin Jennifer, Uncle Robert, Aunt Marie. All of them mentioned that they'd loan money to Natalie. Small amounts at first, 1,000 here, 1,500 there. They were told it was for rent, emergencies, car repairs, medical bills." My heart started pounding. Several people were already looking at me with expressions ranging from confusion to anger. "I started investigating," Marcus continued. "And what I found was disturbing. Over the past 3 years, Natalie has borrowed approximately $47,000 from various family members. None of it has been repaid. None of it was actually needed for the emergencies she claimed." "That's not true," I said, but my voice was too quiet to carry. "I have documentation," Marcus said, pulling papers from his jacket pocket, bank records showing deposits, text messages requesting money, emails explaining various emergencies. Natalie has been systematically defrauding our family, taking advantage of their kindness and concern." "This is ridiculous," I said louder, moving toward the stage. "Marcus, you don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" He cut me off. "Aunt Linda, didn't you loan Natalie $3,000 last year for emergency dental work?" Aunt Linda nodded, her face tight. "She said she was in terrible pain and couldn't afford the procedure." Uncle Robert, Marcus continued, you gave her $5,000 for a security deposit on an apartment. Correct. That's right. Uncle Robert confirmed, crossing his arms. She was about to be homeless, she said. And cousin Jennifer. Marcus looked at my cousin. You gave her money for car repairs, didn't you? 2,500, Jennifer said, her voice cold. My transmission was failing. She told me she'd lose her job without a car. Marcus turned back to address the crowd. None of these emergencies were real. Natalie has been playing on family sympathy to extract money she had no intention of repaying. She's a leech, a con artist, and on Dad's 65th birthday, I think it's time we all knew the truth about the daughter who's been stealing from us. The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. People were looking at me with undisguised disgust. My mother had gone pale, one hand over her mouth. My father's face was red with anger. Natalie, my father said, his voice tight with fury. Is this true? Have you been borrowing money under false pretenses? Dad, I can explain. I started. She's a liar. Bethany cut in, stepping forward. Marcus told me about this last week. I checked my records, too. Natalie borrowed $1,800 from me 2 years ago for emergency medical bills. I never saw that money again because you never needed it back, I said, my voice rising. Bethany, you and David make $400,000 a year. That $1,800 was nothing to you. That's not the point, she snapped. The point is you lied. You said you were desperate, and I believed you. A con artist, someone muttered in the crowd. Shameless, someone else added. I can't believe she'd do this to family, Aunt Marie said, shaking her head. I looked around at all the faces glaring at me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends. All of them united in their judgment. All of them convinced I was a thief. My hands were shaking as I pulled my phone from my purse. This wasn't how I'd wanted this to happen. I'd planned to tell them eventually on my own terms when the time was right, but Marcus had forced my hand. You want to talk about money? I said, my voice loud enough to carry. Fine, let's talk about money. I opened my banking app and pulled up my primary account. Then I turned the phone screen toward the crowd, holding it up high enough for people to see. The numbers were clear. 127, 423, 84752. That's my checking account, I said into the sudden silence. $127 million. My investment accounts total another $438 million. My real estate holdings are worth approximately $89 million. My total net worth is roughly $654 million. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just stared at the phone screen like it was displaying something incomprehensible. The money you think you loaned me? I continued looking directly at Marcus. I never borrowed anything from anyone. I gave money to family members who were struggling. I made it look like loans because I knew they were too proud to accept gifts. That's impossible. Marcus stammered. You can't have that kind of money. You're a freelancer. You live in a tiny apartment. I live in a 3-bedroom penthouse in Riverside Tower that I bought for cash 7 years ago. I corrected. It's worth about $4.2 million now. I call it tiny because it feels small compared to my lake house and my beach property, but by normal standards, it's actually quite spacious. I pulled up another screen on my phone. Here's my investment portfolio. Technology stocks, real estate holdings, private equity investments. I started building this 12 years ago when I was 22. Made my first million by 25. Built from there. My mother swayed on her feet. My father caught her arm to steady her. Aunt Linda, I said, turning to her. You gave me $3,000 for dental work. I didn't need it. You did. I noticed you'd stopped smiling in photos. When I asked, you mentioned your teeth were causing problems, but you couldn't afford to fix them because Uncle Paul's business was struggling. So, I created a reason for you to loan me money, which I immediately transferred back to you through a shell company under the guise of an anonymous charity grant. Aunt Linda's eyes went wide. The Grant Foundation? That was you. Yes. They covered your entire dental reconstruction. $35,000. You've been smiling in photos again for 2 years now. That was the point. I turned to Uncle Robert. The $5,000 for my security deposit. You were behind on your mortgage, 3 months behind. I saw the foreclosure notice on your kitchen counter when I visited. So I borrowed money from you, then anonymously paid off your mortgage arrears through a charitable trust. You thought it was a banking error. Uncle Robert's face had gone from angry to shocked. The mortgage correction. That was you. Yes. You're welcome. I looked at cousin Jennifer. You're $2,500 for car repairs. Jennifer, your daughter needed surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. You were trying to raise $15,000. I gave you back your $2,500 plus the remaining $12,500 through a GoFundMe donation listed as anonymous. Your daughter got her surgery. Jennifer's hands were shaking. The anonymous donor who covered the entire fundraiser. Me? I confirmed. Your daughter is healthy. That was the point. I turned to Bethany. You're $1,800 for medical bills. Bethany, David's practice was underwater. You taken out a second mortgage to keep it afloat. I paid off that second mortgage, all $247,000 through a medical equipment loan that appeared to come from a satisfied patient's foundation. David's practice is now thriving. You're welcome. Bethany looked like she might faint. Every single person Marcus thinks I borrowed from, I said, addressing the crowd, was someone I was actually helping. I made it look like loans because you're all too proud to accept gifts. But the money always came back to you, usually multiplied, always when you needed it most. But how? My father asked, his voice weak. Natalie, where did this money come from? Technology investments, I replied. I started coding when I was 16. Taught myself programming, web development, app creation. In college, I built a data analytics platform that I sold to a tech company for $800,000 when I was 22. I used that to start investing aggressively in early-stage tech companies. Made some very good bets very early. I pulled up another screen. I was an early investor in 7 companies that are now household names. My initial investments of about $200,000 total are now worth approximately $418 million. Add in real estate, other stock holdings, and a venture capital fund I run, and you get to $654 million. A venture capital fund, Marcus repeated numbly. Carter Ventures, I said. We invest in early-stage technology companies with high growth potential. We've funded 43 startups. 21 have been acquired or gone public. Our average return is 634%. We're one of the most successful VC funds under 10 years old. I looked around at all the stunned faces. I've been doing this for 12 years, building wealth, managing investments, running a fund. And for 12 years, you've all assumed I was barely scraping by because I drive a modest car and don't wear designer clothes. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, and she sounded genuinely hurt. I tried, I said. 8 years ago at Christmas, I mentioned I'd sold my first company. Dad changed the subject. 6 years ago at Thanksgiving, I said I was starting a venture fund. Marcus laughed and asked when I'd get a real job. 4 years ago at Easter, I tried to explain my investment portfolio. Bethany told me to stop bragging about money I didn't have, so I stopped trying. But $600 million, my father said, shaking his head. Natalie, that's more than everyone in this family combined. I know, I replied. That's why I've been quietly helping everyone for years. Marcus, your law firm was struggling 3 years ago. You were about to lose your biggest client. Someone anonymously paid that client's outstanding legal fees, and they renewed their contract with you. That was me. You recovered and have been profitable since. Marcus looked stricken. The anonymous payment. We never figured out who. Me, I confirmed. Bethany, when David's practice needed expensive equipment 2 years ago, a medical foundation provided a grant. That was my foundation. Mom, when you wanted to renovate the kitchen, but Dad said you couldn't afford it, you won that radio contest worth $30,000. I bought out the radio station's prize sponsor and made sure you won. My mother's hand went to her throat. The contest rigged. I admitted. I wanted you to have the kitchen you'd always dreamed of without having to ask anyone for help. I looked at my father. Dad, your retirement fund took a major hit in the 2015 market correction. You were going to have to delay retirement by 5 years. Then mysteriously, your fund recovered all its losses and gained an additional 40%. That was me redirecting some returns through your investment company's rebalancing protocol. My father sat down heavily in the nearest chair, my retirement fund. I thought I'd just gotten lucky. No, I said, I've been taking care of this family for years. Quietly, without recognition, I've covered mortgages, medical bills, business losses, and retirement shortfalls. I've done it because I love you and because I could afford to help. I made it look like loans or contests or lucky breaks because I knew you wouldn't accept direct help. 47,000, Marcus said, still holding his ridiculous documentation. That's what you think I borrowed. But I've put approximately $3.2 million back into this family over 3 years. Medical expenses, business bailouts, mortgage payments, educational funds for the kids. All of it flowing back to you through various anonymous sources. The backyard had gone completely silent except for the soft music still playing from the speakers. 80 people stood frozen trying to process what they just learned. My mother was crying openly now. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Marcus had dropped his papers, his case against me completely demolished. Natalie, Aunt Linda said, her voice trembling. I don't understand. Why help us anonymously? Why not just tell us? Because you never would have accepted it, I replied gently. Think about it. If I'd walked into your house 3 years ago and said, I'm a multimillionaire. Let me pay for your dental work. What would you have said? She was quiet for a moment. I would have refused. Said we were fine. That we didn't need charity. Exactly. I confirmed. This family has always valued self-sufficiency, independence, making it on your own. If I'd revealed my wealth and offered to help, you all would have been too proud to accept. So, I found other ways. Ways that let you keep your dignity while still getting you the help you needed. But we accused you, Jennifer said, tears streaming down her face. We stood here and let Marcus call you a thief. We believed you were taking advantage of us. I know, I said, and that hurt. But I understand why. Marcus presented compelling evidence. None of you knew about my actual financial situation. From your perspective, his story made sense. I turned to Marcus. You thought you were protecting the family. You saw what looked like a pattern of borrowing without repayment, and you tried to stop it. Your intentions were good, even if your investigation was incomplete. I called you a con artist, he said, his voice hollow. I humiliated you in front of the entire family. Natalie, I'm so sorry. You didn't know, I said, though the hurt was still fresh. None of you knew because I didn't tell you. That's partially my fault. No, my father said, standing up. That's our fault. We should have asked. We should have paid attention. Natalie, you tried to tell us about your success multiple times and we dismissed you. We made assumptions based on surface things, your car, your clothes, your lifestyle, and we never bothered to look deeper. We treated you like a failure, my mother added, her voice breaking. Our daughter was building an empire, helping our entire family, being extraordinarily successful, and we treated her like she was barely getting by. We failed you as parents. You didn't fail me, I said. You just didn't see me. There's a difference. Is there? My father asked. Because right now, I feel like we failed spectacularly. Natalie, you have $600 million. You run a successful venture capital fund. You've been supporting this entire family for years. And we thanked you by letting your brother publicly accuse you of theft. Actually, I said, pulling up one more screen on my phone. There's something else you should know. Marcus, you said I borrowed $47,000 from the family. You were wrong. I didn't borrow anything. But you were also wrong about the total amount of money involved. I turned my phone to show a spreadsheet. This is a complete accounting of every dollar I've put back into this family over the past 5 years. Medical expenses, business bailouts, mortgage payments, educational funds, emergency assistance, anonymous gifts, charitable grants, everything. The number at the bottom of the spreadsheet was stark. $8,347,653. $8 million, I said quietly. That's how much I've invested in keeping this family stable, healthy, and successful. That's how much your supposed leech has given back. My mother collapsed. She didn't faint dramatically. She just sat down hard on the ground, her legs giving out. My father dropped to his knees beside her, and several relatives rushed over to help. Susan. My father was saying, Susan, breathe. Just breathe. But my mother was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of shock, guilt, and overwhelming grief. $8 million, she whispered. You gave us $8 million, and we called you a leech. You didn't know, I said again, moving closer. Mom, you couldn't have known. We should have known, she said, her voice rising. We should have asked. We should have paid attention. Natalie, what kind of parents are we that we didn't know our daughter was worth $600 million? The kind who made assumptions and stopped questioning them. I replied honestly. But we can move forward from here. Marcus had sat down on the stage stairs, his head in his hands. Bethany was crying, her husband David looking completely shell-shocked. Around the yard, relatives were pulling out their phones, presumably to check bank accounts and look up Carter Ventures and verify that everything I'd said was true. Miss Carter. A voice I didn't recognize spoke up. I turned to see a man I vaguely recognized as one of my father's friends. I'm Stephen Hughes. I run an investment management firm downtown. If what you're saying is true, if you really run Carter Ventures, then you're something of a legend in our industry. I prefer to stay low profile, I said. Clearly, he replied. But I've read about your fund. Your returns are extraordinary. Your deal flow is exceptional. You've made several investments that industry analysts called impossible, and you proved them all wrong. If you're the Carter behind Carter Ventures, you're one of the most successful investors of your generation. I've been fortunate, I said simply. Fortunate. He repeated with a slight laugh. You've been brilliant and your family had no idea. None, I confirmed. He shook his head in amazement. I don't even have words. My father had helped my mother to her feet and they both approached me slowly as if I were a stranger they weren't sure how to talk to. Natalie, my father said, I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Do you hate us? He asked. After years of being dismissed and underestimated after what happened here today, do you hate your family? I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I'm hurt. I'm disappointed that it took a public confrontation for you to see me. But I don't hate you. I love you. That's why I've been helping all these years. We don't deserve your love, my mother said. Or your help. Natalie, we've been terrible to you. You've been human. I corrected. You made assumptions. You stopped asking questions. You let comfortable narratives replace uncomfortable investigations. That's what humans do. It's not good, but it's understandable. What happens now? Bethany asked, approaching with her eyes red from crying. Natalie, where do we go from here? That's up to you, I said. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. Running my fund, managing my investments, building my portfolio. The only difference is now you know about it. Whether that changes our relationship is your choice. I want to change, Marcus said, standing up from the stairs. Natalie, I was so wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. I accused you of theft when you've been the most generous person in this family. I don't know how to apologize for that. Start by deleting that documentation, I suggested. And maybe next time do a more thorough investigation before making public accusations. Done, he said, pulling out his phone and immediately deleting files. Natalie, can I ask why did you let me go through with it? You could have stopped me before I made that speech. Why let me humiliate myself? Because you needed to finish, I replied. You'd built this entire case against me. You were convinced you were protecting the family. If I'd stopped you before you presented your evidence, you never would have believed you were wrong. You had to say everything you wanted to say. Only then would you be ready to hear the truth. He nodded slowly. You're right. And God, I'm so sorry. The party had essentially ended at this point. People were gathering their things, saying awkward goodbyes, clearly eager to leave and process everything they'd witnessed. My father's 65th birthday celebration would be remembered, though not for the reasons anyone had expected. As guests filtered out, my immediate family remained. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Bethany, and their spouses. I think we need to have a real conversation, my father said. All of us. No assumptions, no interruptions, just honesty. I'd like that, I said. We moved to the back porch away from the catering staff who were beginning to clean up. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother broke the silence. Tell us everything, she said. From the beginning. How did you build all of this? So I told them about teaching myself to code at 16, about building that first data analytics platform in college and selling it for $800,000, about the early investments in tech startups that everyone thought were crazy, but that turned into massive returns, about starting Carter Ventures and building it into one of the most successful small VC funds in the country. I told them about the long hours, the careful research, the strategic risks that paid off. I told them about failures too. Investments that went nowhere, startups that crashed, decisions that cost me money but taught me valuable lessons. And I told them about the loneliness of building something extraordinary while your family thinks you're failing, about wanting to share my successes but having no one to share them with, about celebrating major wins alone because the people who should have celebrated with me didn't know they'd happened. Why didn't you just force us to listen? Bethany asked, why not sit us down and make us hear you? Because I wanted you to care enough to ask, I replied honestly. I wanted you to notice that something didn't add up. That I was living modestly but never seemed to struggle for money. That I was always available to help family members financially. That I seemed unconcerned about the things that worried everyone else. I wanted someone to question the narrative and dig deeper, but no one did. We failed you, my father said again. You made mistakes, I corrected. There's a difference. We can learn from mistakes. We can't undo them, but we can do better going forward. I want to do better, my mother said. Natalie, I want to know you, the real you. Not the version I invented. Will you let me try? Yes, I said simply. That's all I've ever wanted. We talked for hours as the sun set and the catering staff finished cleaning up. We talked about investments and business strategies. We talked about family dynamics and communication failures. We talked about pride and assumptions and the danger of surface-level judgments. And slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy. Years of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in one evening, no matter how dramatic the revelation. But it was a start. As I drove home that night in my modest paid-off car to my penthouse that they now knew I owned, I felt something shift. The secret I'd been carrying for years was finally out. The gap between who I was and who they thought I was had finally closed. Marcus had tried to expose me as a con artist. Instead, he'd exposed the truth that I was the most successful member of our family, that I'd been quietly supporting everyone for years, and that I'd done it all without recognition or appreciation because I loved them enough to let them keep their pride. $8 million in family support, $654 million in net worth, 12 years of building an empire. While everyone assumed I was barely getting by, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I'm saying it now. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I smiled and typed back, thank you, Mom. That means everything. Tomorrow, we'd start the real work of rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of honesty instead of assumptions. But tonight, I'd take the small victory of finally being seen. The real me, not the failure they'd imagined, but the daughter who'd succeeded beyond anyone's expectations while they weren't paying attention. And that was worth more than any bank balance.